the second part to that question, I really got the idea for this book, and I got to give props where props is due. I interviewed, yes, I quit counting at 150 interviews for my first book, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. But I got 3 books out of all the interviews that I had, and I never repeated the same interview twice. One was Andy Young, Ambassador Young, and I met him and interviewed him several times. But when he told me, the first interview we had, he said, you know, me and Dr. King, we interviewed, you know, we integrated the lunch counter, but we never integrated the dollar. And I said, Mr. Ambassador, what are you talking about? I said, how do you integrate the dollar? He said, somebody has got to give us the keys, the skill set, the mindset to, you know, to live and and make a being in a capitalistic economy. And Hutch, capitalism is not a dirty word. Capitalism means everything is for sale. If you take the word capitalism, write it on a piece of paper, C-A-P-I-T-A-L-I-S-M, and take the Latin derivative of that word, kaput. Well, what does it mean in Latin? It means head. So my students say, well, Dr. Kimber, what in the world are you talking about? I tell them that in terms of capitalism, what is the one thing you got to use in order to survive? You got to use your head. So I had an opportunity when I started working on that book. I was still taking time away from my job. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep at the time. And here I am, I'm in a doctor's office. And the Lord spoke to me as he so often does, Hutch and Bill. I'm in a doctor's office and I'm waiting to go back to present, you know, what's in my bag. And I reached down, and in this doctor's office, they had old copies of Time magazine. And I picked up an old copy of a Time magazine that had Martin Luther King on the cover. And I'm reading the article. And it said, when Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, there were only 5 black millionaires in the United States. And gave the names, wrote the names in the article. How long did you think it took me to go ahead and write letters for interviews to meet the 5? Of the 5, 4 were still living. Number 1, T.M. Alexander. T.M. Alexander, when he graduated from Morehouse College in 1944, as a graduation gift, his uncle gave him a $100 bill. Did he blow the money? Did he splurge? Did he go on a spending debt? He did none of that. What did he do? He opened up his first insurance company. Number 2, right there in Birmingham, Alabama, AG Gaston. I spent the better part of a day with him, more than 4 hours in his office, and I asked him every question in the book. And by that time, I was going through so much financial strain and everything, and he said to me halfway through the interview, he said, young man, what is wrong? What's going on with you? And I shared where I was financially, and I said I wouldn't blame if my wife and kids left me, and this, I don't know if anybody's ever going to read this book. He lit up his pipe, and he said to me, young man, tell me when you're through. And I said, Dr. Gaston, you didn't hear what I said. He said, I heard every word you said, but let me give you some advice. He says, greatness takes time. Fear not. The acceptable person must be tested in the furnace of adversity. But young man, if you are comfortable where you are, then you need to step aside for someone who isn't. I went up to Chicago and I killed 2 birds with 1 stone in Chicago, S.P. Fuller and John Johnson of Ebony Magazine. I might be the last individual to interview John Johnson because I interviewed him on 3 separate times. And he gave me profound wisdom. He said, if you really want to find the mindset of an individual, all you got to do is look at his or her bank account. And that resonated with me and went back to what Du Bois said. So that was the path that I was on. Now you fast forward the videotape to 2000, actually late 1900s. And there I am, I'm in my MBA class with second-year MBA students, okay? And we got the case study, I'm ready to dive in, I take the cufflinks off, I'm rolling up my sleeves, I'm walking around, and before I got started, one of my students said, Kimber, are you working on any books? And I said, yes, the book that I'm working on is Black Millionaires. And he said, tell us about it. And I said, well, I developed a survey, I'm asking 180 questions, and I told him that when Tom Stanley wrote The Millionaire Next Door, when Tom Stanley wrote The Millionaire Next Door, he had a 247 question survey, And he was only 4 miles away from Clark, Atlanta, because he taught at Georgia State. But the Census Bureau not only knew how many white millionaires in the United States, they gave Stanley zip codes. Right now, there are 62 million millionaires around the globe. Of the 62 million millionaires, 20 million are in the United States. Of the 20 million in the United States, 1.79 million are African American. And of that 1.79, through that 118 question survey that I used, I surveyed, interviewed, and held focus groups with slightly more than 1,000.